Consider possessing wealth 3 times greater than Jeff Bezos at his peak, or wielding such extraordinary influence that the federal government must craft entirely new legislation specifically designed to constrain your corporate power. At the zenith of his business career, John D. Rockefeller's personal fortune represented 1.5% of America's entire economic output. Translated into contemporary currency, that's approximately $280 billion. The engine driving this incomprehensible wealth was his corporation, Standard Oil, which at its maximum reach controlled 90% of American oil refineries and pipeline infrastructure during an era when petroleum demand was exploding exponentially. Here's what makes the Rockefeller story even more remarkable. Most wealthy dynasties see their fortunes evaporate by the 3rd generation, with typically only 10% of original wealth surviving that long. Yet the Rockefeller family remains among the planet's wealthiest and most influential clans more than a century later. Most of their fortune was accumulated through legal means, though legal and ethical don't always align perfectly. This is the saga of how one man transformed American capitalism forever. A century before technology moguls and financial titans dominated headlines, one name embodied wealth and influence above all others: John D. Rockefeller. His birth in 1839 in Richford, New York, offered no hints of the empire he would construct. He appeared utterly ordinary as a child, and predicting he would become among America's most consequential figures would have seemed absurd. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, certainly provided no roadmap to success. William operated as a confidence trickster, later reinventing himself as a fraudulent physician peddling homemade concoctions of dubious medicinal value. His real existence remained wrapped in secrecy and deception. William obsessed over appearing successful even when he wasn't. He devoted considerable attention to his wardrobe and presentation, maintaining an illusion of prosperity regardless of actual circumstances. Whispers suggested his involvement in horse theft operations, painting a portrait of a deeply questionable character. He relocated his family constantly until 1857, when they finally settled in Cleveland, Ohio. William purchased a comfortable residence in the city that would become their permanent base, offering young John opportunities impossible to find in the more saturated markets along the eastern seaboard. During his formative years, John experienced a typical rural childhood, living simply and modestly. He attended local district schools for several months annually, spending remaining time working and playing in countryside settings. He demonstrated intelligence, but nothing particularly noteworthy. He steadily completed whatever tasks were assigned: chopping firewood, caring for horses, managing farm duties, raising poultry. In essence, people barely noticed him. He was profoundly ordinary. The single characteristic that distinguished him was his unusually quiet and reserved demeanor for someone his age. His initial employment was decidedly unimpressive. He abandoned high school to accept a minimum wage position as an assistant bookkeeper, earning merely 50 cents daily. But beneath this humble beginning lay a plan, a vision to escape a lifetime of modest earnings. He saved every penny from his wages, then approached his father for a loan. Given William's dubious character, he presumably had funds concealed somewhere. With combined savings and paternal loan, John Rockefeller entered the business world in 1859, establishing a commodities brokerage called Rockefeller and Clark with a partner. Their firm traded agricultural products and petroleum derivatives. This timing proved brilliant. America's petroleum industry was experiencing its initial boom period. Furthermore, Cleveland's geographic proximity to Pennsylvania oil fields, combined with excellent transportation infrastructure, rapidly transformed it into a refining center. By 1863, Rockefeller and his partners had accumulated sufficient capital to open their own refinery. At this juncture, You might anticipate a heartwarming tale of partnership and shared success, country boys rising from humble origins to achieve the American dream together. But that's not how events unfolded. Even at this early stage, John Rockefeller demonstrated ruthless instincts. Merely 2 years after launching their business, Rockefeller forced out his partner, purchased his interest, and established a new firm with chemist Samuel Andrews. This expansion required additional capital, so he approached millionaire Stephen Harkness. Harkness invested $100,000 as a silent partner, but attached one condition. John must accept Harkness's relative, Henry Flagler, as partner as well. This arrangement proved fortuitous. Flagler's organizational capabilities and innovative business thinking complemented Rockefeller's meticulous financial management and strategic foresight perfectly. Finally, a genuine partnership emerged that would pave the pathway toward Rockefeller's vast industrial domain. By 1870, just a handful of years later, Rockefeller had ascended to become a powerful young man among Ohio's elite circles. But this didn't satisfy his ambitions. He craved more. At merely 31 years old, Rockefeller incorporated the company that would render him inconceivably wealthy and usher in the modern petroleum age. The corporation was named Standard Oil, and its operational tactics were brutal. John managed the enterprise ruthlessly, implementing strategies that distinguished him from competitors. Unlike his contemporaries, Rockefeller's new company concentrated on oil refining rather than exploration or drilling. He selected this focus because refining offered more predictable costs than the volatile exploration sector. Rockefeller's obsession with cost reduction and waste elimination became legendary among his peers. However, his ambitions extended far beyond mere efficiency. He intended to dominate completely. To accomplish this, he invested aggressively in research and development, recruiting the brightest minds and deploying them in what resembled iron-fisted profit engines. Beyond research initiatives, Standard Oil consolidated labor internally and expanded aggressively into markets for refinery byproducts. He even acquired oil sites others dismissed as worthless. For instance, Rockefeller purchased fields in Ohio containing so-called sour oil, considered unusable due to impurities. But Rockefeller understood that sufficient capital applied strategically can solve virtually any problem. He turned to his established research teams, who developed methods to remove impurities, transforming waste into massive profits. This approach of discovering value where others saw nothing became a defining characteristic of Rockefeller's ascent to American industrial supremacy. But this doesn't complete the explanation of Rockefeller's success. Beyond shrewd tactics, he sought to dominate markets in almost literal terms. He perfected the monopoly. He rapidly acquired smaller enterprises to expand his empire, employing a strategy that permanently shaped American capitalism's future. In just the initial 3 months of 1872, Rockefeller either purchased, closed, or bankrupted 22 of his 26 Cleveland competitors. He was merciless in execution. He offered what he characterized as fair market prices to struggling refineries, though in reality, Standard Oil's underhanded tactics were driving them toward bankruptcy. Standard Oil's massive scale provided Rockefeller unprecedented advantages. He negotiated exclusive railroad discounts by guaranteeing enormous daily shipments of 60 oil carloads. These arrangements drastically reduced his transportation expenses. Rivals simply couldn't compete under such favorable terms. Matters worsened when Rockefeller backed the Southern Improvement Company, an overt scheme to fix transportation costs. Public outrage rapidly shut down the proposal despite his ability to influence politicians. Rockefeller learned that even the mightiest tycoon couldn't overpower a united public. And the public thoroughly disliked him. His petroleum empire gained infamy. He was frequently compared to an octopus, tentacles gripping not just the oil industry but steel, copper, shipping, state legislatures, and even reaching the federal government's highest offices. Despite lacking public favor, he continued dominating. By the late 1880s, Standard Oil's dominance was virtually absolute, controlling 90% of American refineries. What John failed to recognize then was that his period of unchallenged supremacy was limited. This overwhelming monopoly, coupled with the Southern Improvement Company scandal, placed intense pressure on politicians facing re-election threats. They finally began passing antitrust legislation and outlawing railroad rebates. Rockefeller's strict policy of avoiding press engagement didn't help matters. This encouraged journalists to investigate Standard Oil more thoroughly, exposing its underhanded tactics to broader audiences. Public scrutiny and legal challenges continued intensifying. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil violated the Sherman Antitrust Act, leading to the company's breakup into 34 independent entities. Eventually, Rockefeller retired from daily operations at age 56, though he remained as company president figurehead. Ironically, this breakup proved a blessing in disguise for Rockefeller personally. The intense pressure of managing such a vast empire had devastated his health. Consider a typical person in their mid-50s, then compare that to contemporary descriptions of Rockefeller. In her exposé, journalist Ida Tarbell described Rockefeller as among the saddest figures in existence. She noted how alopecia had left him completely hairless and pale. She couldn't help remarking that his physical transformation seemed to symbolize his perceived moral failings. Here's where speculation becomes necessary. His ruthless business management, his destruction of countless livelihoods, his brutal elimination of anything obstructing his business construction, all contributed to his deteriorating health. But I believe this also marked a turning point, because at this juncture we observe a dramatic shift in his priorities. He began focusing on something profoundly different: charity. This transformation marked the beginning of the Rockefeller Foundation, which would become the cornerstone of his legacy. Established in 1913 by John D. Rockefeller and his family, this institution marked a transformative pivot from business empire to philanthropy. The foundation was built on substantial endowment and concentrated on three primary areas: public health, education, and scientific research. Rockefeller's commitment to public health proved especially profound. His financial support helped establish the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, both becoming pioneers in biomedical research. This funding played crucial roles in developing vaccines for diseases, including meningitis and yellow fever. Additionally, he revolutionized American medical training and founded China's first modern medical school. Growing up in the country's impoverished regions, Rockefeller strongly championed improved public sanitation and health education. He established public health schools at Johns Hopkins University in 1918 and Harvard University in 1921. He also helped launch nationwide and global health campaigns targeting diseases such as hookworm, malaria, yellow fever, and typhus. This commitment to addressing widespread health challenges established a more strategic approach for the Rockefeller Foundation. Instead of numerous small donations, Rockefeller preferred substantial contributions to institutions with significant potential. He believed in addressing root causes and seeking permanent solutions. Soon, the focus on impactful and sustainable solutions extended well beyond immediate health needs. The Rockefeller Foundation became a key funder of the Green Revolution, which drastically increased agricultural productivity in developing nations and is credited with saving up to 1 billion lives. For many years, the foundation distributed more foreign aid than the entire United States government. So much wealth was donated that only a fraction passed to his descendants. In 1912, Rockefeller's fortune approached $900 million in that era's currency. Upon his death, the estate amounted to only $26 million, demonstrating his philanthropic dedication. Having acknowledged all these contributions and societal benefits, were they genuinely motivated by goodwill and benevolence? The answer is probably more complex. Several reasons could motivate such philanthropy. Tax advantages, rehabilitating a dark historical reputation, building legacy beyond monetary value, and so forth. One can never truly examine the minds of historical figures. All we can do is speculate based on available evidence. But ultimately, one cannot deny the benefits flowing from the Rockefeller Foundation. More than a century later, the Rockefeller family remains a powerful presence. According to Forbes, they hold a combined net worth of $10.3 billion, though some speculate their wealth could be considerably higher. We'll work with currently available public information. Not only that, the family continued producing numerous millionaires and even billionaires. Among the most prominent Rockefeller descendants in the 21st century was David Rockefeller. At 101 years old, he was the world's oldest billionaire when he passed away in 2017. His net worth stood at approximately $3.3 billion. In the oil industry, their influence also remains noticeable. Yes, Standard Oil broke apart into multiple companies due to antitrust rulings. However, many of today's major petroleum corporations, including BP, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, and Chevron, all trace their ancestry back to Standard Oil. Only in 2016 did the family fully divest from oil markets, selling all investments in fossil fuel companies. They claimed ethical motivations for this divestment. The most important question is, what's the secret to their lasting wealth? The answer lies in their strategic approach to wealth preservation. The secret to the Rockefellers' enduring fortune involves exploiting legal frameworks to ensure their vast wealth survives through generations. The Rockefellers pioneered the concept of the family office, a comprehensive entity managing all aspects of family wealth, investments, and business dealings. Central to their wealth management strategy are irrevocable trusts. These trusts cannot be easily modified by heirs. They serve to protect assets from taxes, lawsuits, and creditors. Additionally, the Rockefellers employ what's called a waterfall concept, a wealth transfer strategy utilizing permanent tax-exempt cash value life insurance policies. To simplify, it indefinitely postpones taxes on wealth transfer from one generation to the next. Here's an example. Grandparents take out life insurance policies on each grandchild. As long as grandparents own these policies, they can utilize these funds as desired. Upon their death, policy ownership transfers to grandchildren who benefit from the income and designate beneficiaries for future transfers. What's been described represents publicly available information. Various other measures unknown to ordinary people likely exist that the wealthy employ to reduce tax liability or shield portions of their wealth. But it isn't just their wealth that has endured. Their influence in American politics is staggering. In fact, 2014 marked the first time since 1950 that no Rockefeller occupied a high political office. Multiple family members had served in prominent political roles, including senators and governors, over decades. Moreover, several high-profile politicians have married into the family. Unsurprisingly, the Rockefeller Foundation has served as a political instrument. Initially aimed at supporting global health and educational reforms, the Foundation's work sometimes shifted toward supporting American foreign policy objectives. For instance, in post-war France, the Rockefeller Foundation's involvement helped counteract communism. It played roles in influencing French economic and educational policies, ensuring France remained firmly within America's sphere of influence. Today, global policies continue being shaped by the Rockefeller Foundation alongside other major philanthropic organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Their initiatives range from health and agriculture to international partnerships. However, these often align with market-based interests. Through strategic positioning and substantial investments in global health and economic policies, the Rockefeller family maintains its formidable presence, shaping both domestic and international policies and platforms. Unsurprisingly, critics argue that such efforts often undermine international organizations like the United Nations. They cite that these foundations shift focus toward profit-centered solutions, corrupting global development strategies. Some might even characterize their approach as borderline predatory. They've been accused of placing their employees in international organizations to gain privileged access to scientific, business, and political elites. This strategy has led to a proliferation of global partnerships, particularly in the health sector. Critics contend that these initiatives may sabotage public health development efforts for the sake of increasing their own influence. So yes, as mentioned earlier, philanthropy and seemingly generous acts can often originate from self-preservation and political calculation. Having said that, it cannot be denied that regardless of motivations, many beneficiaries resulted from these philanthropic acts. John D. Rockefeller was masterful at navigating the system, ruthlessly capitalizing on every opportunity within existing rules. When those rules no longer suited his ambitions, he wasn't afraid to influence their modification. His philanthropy reshaped education, science, and public health, leaving lasting positive impacts. However, we must view his legacy with appropriate skepticism, recognizing moral compromises underlying his wealth accumulation. While John Rockefeller's contributions undeniably improved countless lives, they were often built upon a system he manipulated to personal advantage. He represents a complex figure who defined both darker and brighter aspects of American capitalism. His story demonstrates how individual ambition, when combined with strategic thinking and ruthless execution, can reshape entire industries and establish dynasties lasting generations. It also illustrates how wealth accumulated through questionable practices can be transformed into philanthropic legacies that genuinely benefit society, even as questions about underlying motivations persist. The Rockefeller saga reminds us that capitalism's titans often operate in moral gray zones, building empires through combinations of innovation, ruthlessness, strategic thinking, and willingness to exploit every advantage. His transformation from ruthless monopolist to celebrated philanthropist suggests that even those who accumulate wealth through morally questionable means can create lasting positive impacts, though this doesn't erase the harm caused during wealth accumulation. Today, we continue living with consequences of decisions made by John D. Rockefeller over a century ago. The petroleum industry he helped create continues shaping global politics and economics. The philanthropic model he pioneered influences how billionaires approach giving. The legal structures he exploited to preserve wealth across generations continue being refined and employed by wealthy families worldwide. The antitrust frameworks developed partly in response to his monopolistic practices continue influencing how we regulate corporate power. His story raises enduring questions about wealth, power, and responsibility. How much wealth concentration should society tolerate? When does business success cross into harmful monopoly? Can philanthropic contributions redeem fortunes built through exploitation? How should we balance innovation and competition with protecting public interest? These questions remain urgently relevant as we navigate an era of unprecedented wealth concentration and corporate power. John D. Rockefeller's legacy is neither purely heroic nor purely villainous. It's complicated, contradictory, and ultimately human. He demonstrated extraordinary vision and capability while also displaying ruthlessness and disregard for those crushed beneath his empire's expansion. He accumulated unconscionable wealth through practices we now recognize as harmful, then deployed much of that wealth toward genuinely beneficial purposes. He shaped American capitalism's trajectory while simultaneously creating the regulatory responses designed to constrain such power. Understanding Rockefeller means grappling with these contradictions rather than resolving them neatly. It means recognizing that history's most consequential figures are rarely simply good or evil, but complex individuals whose actions create ripples extending far beyond their lifetimes. It means acknowledging both the genuine benefits flowing from Rockefeller philanthropy and the genuine harms caused by Standard Oil's monopolistic practices. Most importantly, it means learning from both aspects of his story as we navigate contemporary questions about wealth, power, and responsibility in our own era.